At 5:52, I unlocked the office before sunrise and stood in the dark for 10 full seconds before I touched the switch. I wanted one final quiet moment where the room was still only a room and not a battlefield made of timestamps, signatures, and filing windows. Then I switched on the lights, and the whiteboard came back into view. 3 columns, 3 chains, one question that had carried me across 6 episodes. Authority chain, money chain, beneficiary chain. By the time we reached this final hearing day, nobody on either side could seriously pretend this was only a family disagreement. Family language had been the cover. Infrastructure was the target. Every important move had happened through systems that looked ordinary until you tracked who touched which field, in what order, under what declared scope, and with what downstream effect. At 6:01, I opened the day file named E7_hearing_day_master. I duplicated the sheet we used yesterday and added 2 mandatory columns that had been blank all week: executable order and expected consequence. We had enough evidence to prove inconsistency. Proof alone was no longer enough. If each proof item did not connect to a concrete order that changed behavior in the real world, this entire season would become an expensive argument with no repair value. At 6:08, Priya called without greeting, which was how she sounded when she was fully focused. No trust merits detour, she said. No personality framing. No motive speech unless they open that door. We stay on governance, route control, and authorization boundaries. Understood. If they try to paint this as misunderstanding, answer with system behavior, not adjectives. Understood. If the judge gives us implementation latitude, we request sequence, not slogan. Already drafting it. She paused, then lowered her voice. Today is where we stop proving and start restoring. At 6:17, Daniel dropped a fresh folder into shared drive, day 7_forensic_refresh. Inside were updated visualizations based on overnight disclosure packets from bank risk operations, escrow reconciliation, and hospital legal metadata. He called out one detail in chat. In the disputed window, the 3 split payment requests were not merely close in time. Their field edit rhythm showed deterministic operator behavior. Not just same device cluster. Same sequencing signature. Same hesitation pattern before commit. I read his note twice. Do not claim certainty on identity. Claim certainty on action path. That sentence was exactly why I trusted him. At 6:24, I opened the Interim Independent Manager's 72-hour report.
The format was dry by design.
Dry was good. Dry left fewer places for interpretation error. 11 non-routine payment requests intercepted. 3 attempts to invoke legacy template path. 9 requests lacking contract ID, deliverables trace, or authorization mapping. 1 class of requests allowed without delay: payroll, taxes, insurance, and direct patient care operations. 0 approved consultancy class emergency disbursements. No dramatic wording. Just behavior under controls. In legal process, this is what truth usually looks like after panic burns off. At 6:31, I reviewed the voice forensics summary again. By this point, I knew every sentence by shape. High consistency on voice sprint model comparison. No splice artifact markers in waveform integrity checks. No timeline anomalies in message container metadata. Routing chain consistent with provider-side records. Preservation hashes valid across transfer stages. The content line was the same one that shifted this entire matter from concern to emergency. Move the priority before Sunday surgery, and we can fix paperwork later. Not a legal conclusion. Not a verdict. But an action intention linked to a narrow time window, now backed by admissible technical chain. At 6:39, I made tea I did not drink and stood at the whiteboard with a marker in my hand, rewriting the same 3-chain map for what felt like the 10th time. Authority chain asked, who had declared scope, who crossed scope, who confirmed route eligibility. Money chain asked, where funds moved through which path states and under what support documents. Beneficiary chain asked, who stood to gain from timing and sequencing changes if controls failed. At 6:41, I switched from prep mode to hearing mode and wrote one line in block letters. Final hearing equals consequence mapping. After 6 episodes, this had stopped being about who sounded persuasive. It was about which controls would exist tomorrow morning. At 6:53, the updated morning packet from the independent manager hit inbox with signatures attached. This version had one new appendix: attempted route reconstructions performed by staff who had access before suspension. The appendix showed exactly why we were asking for template retirement rather than temporary pause. Even under warning banners, users attempted to recreate old path behavior by repackaging categories and editing support notes in a way that looked procedural at first pass. That was the moment I knew temporary caution language would fail. We needed structural constraints. At 7:02, my mother sent one message: "I will answer only what I signed and what I did not sign." That was the best sentence she could send me on this day. At 7:07, Daniel joined me in conference room B with printed exhibits arranged by witness order. He had color tabs on each stack: blue for institution records, green for process metadata, orange for controlled scope testimony, red for disputed route transitions. "We're not trying to win a speech contest," he said. "We are trying to close re-entry paths. If they ask whether we hate each other, we answer with status codes." At 7:14, Priya arrived with no coat despite the rain and placed one folder in the center of the table. Order language, draft narrow form. "If we get broad order, they appeal broadness first," she said. "If we get narrow order that still controls route behavior, they have less room to unwind fast." She walked us through final sequence. 1. Establish template scope boundaries from bank witness. 2. Establish actual request behavior under that boundary. 3. Establish cross-domain mismatch from hospital legal. 4. Establish beneficiary-linked risk from escrow trace. 5. Request implementation language that protects continuity while disabling abuse surface. At 7:19, I loaded the hearing timetable into my notes and wrote one private reminder under it: "Do not argue pain. Argue process." At 7:27, opposing counsel sent what he called a settlement exploration message. He proposed lifting escrow freeze in exchange for private reconciliation discussions and mutual non-disparagement language. Priya replied in under 2 minutes. "We can discuss settlement after preservation and accountability orders are entered and route controls are stabilized." There was no follow-up. At 7:31, I expanded the master table from 22 rows to 47 rows and began writing the 2 columns we had left blank for days. Evidence without order is warning. Order without consequence mapping is theater. Row by row, I translated records into enforceable changes. If evidence showed category mislabeling risk, order required whitelist category taxonomy with legal gate. If evidence showed split request pattern under threshold edge, order required cumulative window threshold checks. If evidence showed template reuse in prohibited class, order required template retirement and policy state lock. This was slow work, and it was the only work that mattered. At 7:39, Rainier Escrow delivered supplemental verification. Last 4 identity alignment, phone suffix alignment, source account chain from Northline split transfers through Blue Cedar and North Harbor into RC, 7712 path. Timestamp proximity within disputed execution window. Not final liability, but sufficient to preserve funds pending adjudication. At 7:44, Daniel updated one chart title from suspected convergence to observed convergence. I asked why. Because this chart is no longer theory. Every node now has a source packet. At 7:49, I reviewed my own statement and removed every sentence that sounded like personal accusation. By the end, my statement read almost mechanical: which documents I saw, what each document authorized, what each document did not authorize, which route states changed anyway, what happened after controls were imposed. It felt emotionally incomplete. It was legally complete. At 7:58, we left for court in 2 cars. Rain stayed thin but constant. On the ride over, my aunt called once and asked one question: "Will this end today?" The argument might. The implementation starts today. Then bring back implementation. At 8:06, security line moved slowly because another courtroom had a high-volume docket. I stood between two strangers arguing about parking validation and thought how ordinary this building feels for a place where timing can change a life. At 8:09, doors opened. The judge entered, looked at both tables, and set the frame in one sentence. Today we address records, route behavior, and executable protections. We are not here for character theater. I wrote that sentence down exactly. At 8:14, opposing counsel requested brief opening before witness sequence. Granted. At 8:21, he delivered the same continuity narrative we expected. Family emergency, hospital pressure, operational urgency, clerical imperfection, no intent to exploit. He admitted route complexity. He admitted split transfers. He admitted template invocation. He denied intentional evasion. He framed everything as flawed coordination under stress. He was smart enough not to deny what logs could prove. He was trying to relabel it. At 8:29, Priya stood and asked permission to proceed with narrow cross focused on policy state and route eligibility behavior. Granted. At 8:34, bank risk witness was sworn in remotely. Priya began with definitions, not accusations. Please define legacy OPS micro. Template route for low risk, low amount, high frequency operational disbursements. Does policy permit consultancy class strategic transfers under that template?
No.
What is single request limit in applicable policy version? 250,000. What happens when request class mismatches template policy class? Proper behavior is route rejection or escalation, depending on configured controls. Do disputed requests in this matter share attachment ID?
Yes. At OPS 9921.
Do they share snapshot generation window? Yes. Were 3 requests submitted below single request threshold? Yes. Were they close enough in timing to raise cumulative pattern review under current controls? Under current controls, yes. Under controls active then, cumulative check was limited. Did the same template applicability account confirm route eligibility? Yes. Which account? Chenat. Did initiation account differ?
Yes.
Chenat. Any indicator of forced back office override by bank operator in those specific requests? No forced override marker in those request IDs. Every answer narrowed the room for ambiguity. At 8:42, opposing counsel tried to broaden cross into hypothetical branch pressure and staffing levels. Judge allowed limited scope, but interrupted when it drifted. Counsel, operational staffing context is not a substitute for policy class fit. At 8:46, Priya requested admission of policy excerpt and request metadata map. Admitted. At 8:49, Daniel took stand for technical attribution summary. He explained carefully, always drawing boundary between certainty and probability. We do not claim face identification through logs. We claim path identification with high confidence. He mapped same origin behavior to 4 observable clusters. 1. Identical IP and subnet transitions across request preparation and commit intervals. 2. Consistent field edit order. 3. Consistent pause signatures before submission. 4. Consistent metadata hygiene patterns in support attachment handling. He explained why this matters. Shared accounts in random environments produce noisy behavior. This window produced deterministic behavior. Opposing counsel attacked with a shared device narrative. Daniel answered the same way each time. Possible in theory. Not supported by observed pattern under quantitative comparison. No flourish. No overreach. At 8:57, Judge asked one direct question. Can the court rely on your model to assign legal intent? No, Your Honor. The model assigns behavioral consistency and path convergence, not legal intent. Can the court rely on your model to evaluate whether this was random administrative confusion? Yes, with high confidence. Random confusion is inconsistent with observed sequence regularity. That answer landed. At 9:03, hospital legal representative testified with narrow packet we requested. Key fields. 18:05, Administrative communication authorization signed. 1822. Property-related upload attempt created. 1824. Scope mismatch flagged pending legal review. 1825. No completed intake for property authority expansion. Opposing counsel pushed implied family consent. Judge responded before witness had to. Implied consent is not cross-domain authorization where explicit scope channels exist. At 9:11, hospital legal confirmed one more point. There was no finalized status transition from medical communication proxy to property control authorization during disputed window. At 9:15, I realized my hands had gone cold even though room was warm. At 9:19, my mother testified. She kept to 3 statements as promised. I signed administrative communication authorization. I did not sign property authority expansion. I provided later disclosures through counsel-limited language. Opposing counsel asked whether she felt pressured by me. She answered, I was pressured by uncertainty. I answered based on what I signed. No extra words. At 9:26, opposing counsel tried to introduce emotional context around family medical stress. Judge allowed brief latitude, then directed return to scope facts. At 9:30, there was a pause while exhibits were queued. At 9:34, my third uncle Chun Ming testified. He confirmed source chain for audio record, storage handoff timing, and reason for delayed submission. He withheld until escrow-linked risk became visible and legal channel was established. Opposing counsel called that opportunistic. He replied, I avoided informal circulation and used formal preservation once risk threshold changed. That answer may have looked simple. It was actually the difference between rumor and evidence. At 9:41, escrow representative authenticated supplemental chain packet and confirmed preservation status on disputed funds. Not final ownership determination. Controlled holding pending adjudication. At 9:47, father's statement was introduced through counsel with hospital legal capacity confirmation limited to the statement window. Scope of statement. He authorized medical communication assistance. He did not authorize beneficiary reorder or management control reassignment under unresolved property consent status. Opposing counsel objected on weight. Judge overruled on admissibility, reserved weight for order reasoning. At 9:54, we moved into integration phase, connecting authority evidence, money movement evidence, and beneficiary risk evidence without stepping into trust merits determination. Priya stood and said, We are not asking this court to settle final family entitlement today. We are asking this court to prevent route behavior that can irreversibly distort that entitlement before final merits process. At 10:01, opposing counsel requested recess for client consultation. 10 minutes granted. At 10:06, final statements began. Opposing counsel's close. Maintain temporary oversight. Remove freeze to reduce operational damage. Treat anomalies as process defects, not route abuse. Avoid long-duration permission suspensions. Priya's close. If freeze lifts now, disputed funds can re-enter mutation path before merits review. If freeze remains with controlled return mechanism, continuity remains stable and disputed scope remains recoverable. If legacy template survives, known abuse surface stays open. If route control shifts to independent manager with narrow lane, operational continuity and rights preservation can coexist. She ended with one sentence. Order should be boring, specific, and hard to misread. At 10:16, judge took review break. No one at our table spoke for 3 minutes. At 10:21, I opened my notebook and wrote down the outcomes we could live with and the outcomes we could not. Could live with. Continued independent management. Template retirement. Preservation freeze with review schedule. Could not live with. Freeze removal before chain stabilization. Restoration of unrestricted route authority. Generic, cooperate in good faith, language, without mechanism. At 10:28, judge returned and began reading order language point by point, slower than usual, as if he wanted each phrase to survive appeal scrutiny. Order Item 1. The 3 split disbursements executed through historical template path during disputed window exceeded applicable class scope. Order Item 2. Interim independent management over non-routine disputed account disbursements is extended 12 months, subject to scheduled review. Order Item 3. Legacy template path used in disputed disbursements is retired in this environment and replaced by whitelist templates requiring dual verification and accountable mapping. Order Item 4. RC 7712 preservation freeze remains in place. Recoverable disputed funds prioritized for controlled return. Order Item 5. Amounts not immediately returnable enter phase secured return track under court-supervised reporting. Order Item 6. Direct initiation and template applicability confirmation permissions for disputed path remain suspended for designated accounts pending further order. Order Item 7. Northline must submit governance remediation plan in 30 days, including dual sign controls, quarterly external audit checks, conflict disclosure protocol, and template review governance. Order Item 8. Voice forensics packet admitted for subsequent liability interface, with preserved bilateral review rights. Then judge added what mattered most for operational continuity. These controls are not intended to interrupt ordinary payroll, tax, insurance, and direct care disbursements. At 10:37, opposing counsel requested clarification on appeal rights. Judge confirmed standard rights preserved. At 10:40, opposing counsel gave notice of intent to challenge scope and duration components. Expected. At 10:44, implementation started before we left room. Bank operations representative confirmed policy state switch in live console. Legacy OPS micro dash disabled by order. Disputed lane dash dual approval plus legal review. Independent manager dash active non-routine control authority. At 10:49, Daniel verified first post-order event in monitoring feed. One attempted non-routine request entered queue and halted at legal review gate pending documentation. No bypass indicator. At 10:53, Priya looked at me and nodded once. That nod said more than celebration would have. At 10:57, Rainier issued execution memo. 560,000 designated returnable under order to compliance supervised account within 7 business days. Remaining 60,000 currently spread through expense channels enters secured return and reporting track. At 11:02, independent manager submitted first post-order control bulletin. No interruption to routine operations. All non-routine requests routed through revised control state. Legacy path no longer available in dispute environment. At 11:07, my phone filled with messages that all asked versions of the same thing. Is it over? I sent one answer to everyone. Implementation started. Continue lawyer channel. At 11:13, my mother messaged that she would move to temporary apartment and keep communications formal for now. I replied, received. At 11:18, Aunt asked if this meant family dinner was possible again. I answered honestly, not today. At 11:22, Uncle sent, whatever comes next, at least the money cannot move in the dark. That was the best one-line summary of this order. At 11:26, opposing counsel filed reservation notice for appeal on 2 narrow points: return scope and suspension duration. Priya said, good. Narrow appeal means they know broad attack is weak. At 11:31, we moved to hallway table and prepared response framework. No rhetoric, just sequence. Preservation necessity, proportional control duration, operational continuity carve-outs. Review schedule safeguards. At 11:39, Linda's counsel sent proposal to cooperate on handover while rejecting accusatory language. Priya drafted response in 9 lines. We can discuss language later. First, transfer account control maps. Then transfer template permission maps. Then transfer attachment lineage maps. Then transfer approval logs. At 11:45, I reviewed handover checklist and added 3 items based on earlier failures. Historic template alias mappings. Category, taxonomy, overrides. Escalation suppression settings active in disputed window. At 11:52, independent manager delivered remediation schedule. Within 48 hours, permission reset complete. Within 7 days, template governance draft. Within 30 days, First compliance remediation report. At 11:58, Daniel validated that post-order logs were being mirrored to independent archive with preservation hashes enabled. At 12:03, Priya left for next hearing and stopped at door. You asked for consequences. Now protect maintenance. Consequences fail if maintenance fails. At 12:08, I video called my father in rehab room. His speech was slow but clear. Fix the rules first. Rules first, relationship later. He nodded and closed his eyes for a second like that sentence cost energy but gave relief. At 12:14, nurse asked if legal calls could pause during treatment window. Yes, I said, always. At 12:18, I sat in hallway and opened final table one more time. 47 rows. 47 consequence mappings. For the first time, no row had TBD in the order column. At 12:22, Daniel joined me remotely, and we merged all 3 chains into one end-state grid. Authority chain, overreach confirmed, permissions constrained, independent manager active. Money chain, split route confirmed, major portion recoverable, remainder secured return tracked. Beneficiary chain, preservation freeze maintained, link fields established, completion interface reserved for merit stage. He added one line. Residual risk under monitored control. I added one line. Visible consequence entered. At 12:29, we exported the grid as PDF and CSV, signed both, and stored to 2 repositories, Litigation Vault and Operational Governance Vault. At 12:34, I received the first truly boring alert in weeks. Routine payroll batch executed under normal schedule. Nothing in that sentence sounded dramatic. It still made me breathe easier. At 12:39, I reviewed the old fear that had started episode 1, that a system can be rewritten quietly while everyone argues about tone. Today did not erase that fear. It reduced its power. At 12:43, opposing side asked for copy of order implementation checklist. We provided it through counsel channel exactly as filed. At 12:46, I logged all outgoing disclosures and verified each had recipient hash and timestamp record. At 12:49, I archived a file as E7_Yendi_0120 and tagged status. Order entered. Implementation active. Appeal expected. Monitoring continuous. At 12:54, I finally drank the tea I made at dawn. It was cold and slightly bitter. At 12:58, I cleaned the whiteboard except for one sentence. Control is not punishment. Control is memory with enforcement. At 13:03, before leaving, I wrote the closing line for the series. I won back my position inside the system. What I lost was the version of me that believed closeness alone could keep a process from being rewritten. I was not looking for celebration. I was looking for a tomorrow that could arrive as a schedule instead of an ambush. For the first time since this began, that looked possible. At 13:09, I opened a new section in the same file because I knew future me would forget details once the adrenaline fell off. If this story was going to mean anything beyond one court day, it needed a complete operational memory, not only dramatic memory. What follows is the implementation annex I wrote before I went home. Annex A, Evidence to Order, Mapping Register. Entry 01, Evidence ID E10001 Source. Branch Intake Page Window, May 2nd, 2026, 8:29 Observation. Continuity Packet Combined Limited POA and Administrative Hospital Contact without completed Property Authority Transition Order Link. Item 3 Template Retirement and Dual Verification Expected Consequence. Prohibited cross-domain packaging cannot route through legacy template in disputed lane. Entry 02 Evidence ID E10002 Source. Trust Portal State Log Window, May 2nd, 2026, 8:31 Observation. Beneficiary status shifted to pending verification before final authority chain completion order link. Item 4 Freeze plus Item 8 Controlled Liability Interface Expected Consequence. No further beneficiary-sensitive transfer can outrun verification sequence. Entry 03 Evidence ID E10003 Source. Branch Risk Note Window, May 2nd, 2026, 8:32 observation. Manual override trace existed as checkpoint artifact though forced override marker absent on final requests order link. Item 7 remediation and external audit checks expected consequence. Checkpoint artifacts become auditable governance inputs instead of discarded side notes. Entry 0 for evidence ID E2-0010 source. Insurer call memo window. May 2nd, 2026, 9:13 observation. Operational continuity risk cited correctly, but risk argument used to support non-operational authority expansion attempt order link. Item 2 operational carve-out language and Item 3 path controls expected consequence. Continuity rationale remains valid only inside allowed disbursement classes. Entry 05 evidence ID E2-0014 source. County filing event record window. May 2nd, 2026, 9:42 observation. Proposed amendment notice filed without executed authority attachment order link. Item 4 preservation and Item 8 staged review rights expected consequence. Proposal events cannot trigger irreversible value movement before merits review. Entry 06 evidence ID E2-0018 source. Family packet version V3 window. May 2nd, 2026, 11:58 observation. Non-disruption letter attempted to restrict external legal reporting while route states remained provisional order link. Item 5 reporting track and Item 7 conflict disclosure protocol expected consequence. Unilateral reporting restraints lose leverage where formal supervision is active. Entry 07 evidence ID E3-0031 source. Version trace JSON window. May 3rd, 2026, 0:43-107 observation. Rapid sequence of create, template replace, comment clean, upload, distribution, payment draft initiation order link. Item 7 template governance and quarterly external review expected consequence. Midnight dense edit clusters trigger mandatory audit attention and cannot pass as routine drafting noise. Entry 08 evidence ID E3-0038 source. Room access logs window. May 2nd, 2026, 19-2030 observation. No board participants matched claimed meeting attendance window order link. Item 7 remediation and attachment lineage transfer obligations expected consequence. Meeting claims require physical and distribution consistency to support route eligibility arguments. Entry 09 evidence ID E3-0042 source. Minutes distribution list window. May 3rd, 2026, 107 observation. First distribution timestamp inconsistent with same evening unanimous approval narrative order link. Item 7 sequencing corrections in governance plan expected consequence. Chronology mismatch becomes explicit control trigger rather than discretionary concern. Entry 10 evidence ID E3-0049 source. Payment request metadata window. May 3rd, 2026, 0:56 observation. Strategic consulting amount request initiated immediately after document hygiene operations order link. Item 3 route gate hardening expected consequence. Support file grooming cannot silently front-load payment path access. Entry 11 evidence ID E4-0054 source. Escrow packet intake window. May 3rd, 2026, 10:06 observation. RC 7712 appeared as beneficiary linked settlement endpoint under incomplete beneficial owner narrative order link. Item 4 freeze and Item 5 phase secured return expected consequence. Disputed endpoint remains static while ownership and source chain are tested. Entry 12 evidence ID E4-0059 source. Bank transition log window. May 3rd, 2026, 10:18 observation. Split requests mapped to same attachment identifier with near identical route preparation cadence order link. Item 3 dual verification and cumulative threshold review expected consequence. Serial threshold edge structuring faces deterministic controls. Entry 13 evidence ID E4-0063 source. Hospital status matrix window. May 2nd, 2026, 1824 observation. Scope mismatch status remained pending. No completed property authority conversion order link. Item 1 findings and Item 2 constrained operational lane expected consequence. Unresolved scope cannot be borrowed as a bridge for property route actions. Entry 14 Evidence ID E4-0068 Source. Message Preservation #Ledger Window. Submitted May 4, 2026 Observation. Source integrity preserved across transfer chain with no hash drift order link. Item 8 Evidentiary interface continuity expected consequence. Subsequent liability review has stable technical substrate. Entry 15 Evidence ID E5-0072 Source. Split transfer chain map window. May 3, 2026 to May 5, 2026 Observation. 620,000 moved in 3 requests below single threshold with shared support packet context order link. Item 1 Scope Finding and Item 3 Template Retirement expected consequence. Future structuring attempts cannot inherit same low-friction route. Entry 16 Evidence ID E5-0079 Source. Route Classifier Snapshot Window. Disputed Observation. Consultancy intent surfaced in notes while route class labeled operational order link. Item 3 Taxonomy Governance and Legal Review Q expected consequence. Class note mismatch triggers route hold instead of auto progression. Entry 17 Evidence ID E5-0083 Source. Escrow Identity Suffix Check Window. May 5, 2026 Observation. Endpoint identity suffix aligned with designated linked actor profile order link. Item 4 Freeze and Item 5 Secured Return expected consequence. Endpoint risk preserved for adjudication rather than dissipated by movement. Entry 18 Evidence ID E5-0088 Source. Council Disclosure Chain Window. May 5, 2026 Observation. Formal channel adoption increased after preservation orders. Informal routing declined order link. Item 7 Disclosure Protocol expected consequence. Case narrative shifts from rumor loops to recordable exchanges. Entry 19 Evidence ID E6-0092 Source. Bank Attestation Packet Window. May 6, 2026 Observation. Template approval action performed by accountable account under customer-side session. Not anonymous institutional override order link. Item 6 Permission Suspension expected consequence. Responsibility remains tied to account actions despite system approval automation. Entry 20 Evidence ID E6-0099 Source. Policy Scope File Window. Active Policy Version in Dispute Observation. Legacy Template Excluded Consultancy and Capital Transfer Classes explicitly order link. Item 1 and Item 3 expected consequence. Policy text mismatch becomes determinative in route eligibility analysis. Entry 21 Evidence ID E6-0104 Source. Institution Testimony Transcript Window. Hearing Day 6 Observation. Route behavior acknowledged as field first classification then threshold check order link. Item 3 and Item 7 expected consequence. Field governance receives equal weight with amount thresholds in remediation framework. Entry 22 Evidence ID E6-0112 Source. Court Interim Order Log Window. Day 6 Afternoon Observation. Independent Manager Empowered without Routine Operation Interruption Order Link. Item 2 Continuity Carve-out expected consequence. Rights protection and operational continuity remain coexisting design goals. Entry 23 Evidence ID E6-0118 Source. Control State Monitor Window. Day 6 to Day 7 Observation. Non-routine queue shifts to supervised channel. No emergency bypass accepted order link. Item 2 and Item 3 expected consequence. Pressure language no longer sufficient to force low-friction execution. Entry 24 Evidence ID E7-0122 Source. Independent Manager Report 72H Window. Pre-hearing Day 7 Observation. 11 non-routine attempts intercepted. 3 legacy path invocations blocked order link. Item 3 Retirement and Item 7 Governance Plan expected consequence. Empirical evidence supports structural control necessity beyond temporary caution. Entry 25 Evidence ID E7-0127 Source. Voice Forensics Summary Window. Admitted Day 7 Observation. High consistency match with intact chain and no splice markers order link. Item 8 Evidence Interface Expected Consequence. Timeline intent indicators remain available for later liability stage. Entry 26 Evidence ID E7-0131 Source. Hearing transcript bank cross window. Day 7 834 to 846 Observation. Witness confirmed class exclusion and shared attachment behavior order link. Item 1 and Item 3 Expected Consequence. Order rests on admitted institutional definitions, not external interpretation. Entry 27 Evidence ID E7-0136 Source. Hearing transcript technical cross window. Day 7 849 to 902 Observation. Deterministic sequence regularity inconsistent with random shared use profile order link. Item 6 Account path restrictions expected consequence. Repeated shared use defense has reduced operational value absent new contrary logs. Entry 28 Evidence ID E7-0142 Source. Hospital legal testimony window. Day 7 903 to 911 Observation. No finalized property authority transition in disputed window order link. Item 1 Scope finding expected consequence. Medical channel cannot serve as latent bridge for property control actions. Entry 29 Evidence ID E7-0147 Source. Mother testimony window. Day 7 919 Observation. Signature scope limited to administrative communication. No expansion instrument executed order link. Item 1 and Item 2 Expected consequence. Family distress context does not expand legal scope by assumption. Entry 30 Evidence ID E7-0151 Source. Uncle testimony window. Day 7 934 Observation. Delayed submission rationale tied to formal preservation threshold rather than informal circulation order link. Item 8 Review rights expected consequence. Source handling gains admissibility durability. Entry 31 Evidence ID E7-0158 Source. Father statement packet window. Day 7 947 Observation. Consent to medical communication affirmed. Consent to rights affecting reorder denied under unresolved status order link. Item 1 and Item 4 Expected consequence. Disputed rights movement remains frozen pending merits. Entry 32 Evidence ID E7-0163 Source. Final order text window. Day 7 1028 Observation. Controls specific, narrow, and continuity-aware order link. All operative items expected consequence. Appeal risk reduced by precision and operational carve-outs. Entry 33 Evidence ID E7-0168 Source. Bank Live Console Confirmation Window. Day 7 1044 Observation. Legacy template displayed disabled by order state in dispute environment order link. Item 3 Implementation expected consequence. Known route is technically unavailable, not merely discouraged. Entry 34 Evidence ID E7-0172 Source. Post-order queue event window. Day 7 1049 Observation. Non-routine request halted for legal review due to support gap order link. Item 3 and Item 7 Expected consequence. Policy state transition produces immediate behavior change. Entry 35 Evidence ID E7-0177 Source. Escrow execution memo window. Day 7 1057 Observation. 560,000 returnable under schedule. 60,000 on secured return track order link. Item 4 and Item 5 Expected consequence. Recovery path splits by practical recoverability without losing supervision. Entry 36 Evidence ID E7-0181 Source. Independent Manager Bulletin Window. Day 7 1102 Observation. Routine operations preserved while non-routine controls tightened order link. Item 2 Continuity Function Expected consequence. Workforce and treatment obligations proceed without dispute lane leakage. Entry 37 Evidence ID E7-0186 Source. Appeal Reservation Notice Window. Day 7 1126 Observation. Challenge scope narrowed to duration and return extent order link. Response planning under Item 2 to 5 Framework Expected consequence. Defense resources concentrate on proportionality and necessity record. Entry 38 Evidence ID E7-0191 Source. Handover negotiation message window. Day 7 1139 Observation. Cooperation offered conditionally. Language dispute detached from technical transfer needs order link. Item 7 transfer execution sequencing expected consequence. Tone disputes cannot delay control map transfer. Entry 39 evidence ID E7-0196 source. Remediation schedule window. Day 7-11-52 observation. 48H. 7D. 30D milestones accepted by independent manager order link. Item 7 timeline enforceability expected consequence. Remediation progress becomes measurable against explicit deadlines. Entry 40 evidence ID E7-0201 source. Merged end state grid window. Day 7-12-22 observation. No open row remained without mapped order and consequence field order link. Execution governance expected consequence. Monitoring can shift from argument mode to compliance mode. Entry 41 evidence ID E7-0206 source. Post-order peril alert window. Day 7-12-34 observation. Routine peril completed under revised control state order link. Item 2 continuity carve-out validation expected consequence. Legitimacy of controls strengthened by uninterrupted ordinary operations. Entry 42 evidence ID E7-0211 source. Outgoing disclosure log window. Day 7-12-46 observation. All council transfers carried timestamp and recipient hash order link. Item 8 review rights and preservation discipline expected consequence. Later authenticity disputes face higher burden. Entry 43 evidence ID E7-0216 source. Archive status tags window. Day 7-12-49 observation. Order entered. Implementation active. Appeal expected. Monitoring continuous order link. Operational transition management expected consequence. Team posture remains stable across litigation and compliance tracks. Entry 44 evidence ID E7-0221 source. Independent manager access map window. Generated post-order observation. Disputed non-routine controls centralized under supervised account with audit trail order link. Item 2 and Item 6 expected consequence. Direct disputed path touchpoints remain constrained. Entry 45 evidence ID E7-0225 source. Template alias inventory window. Handover draft observation. Historical aliases could replicate legacy behavior if not retired together order link. Item 3 retirement completeness expected consequence. Route retirement covers aliases and derivative labels. Entry 46 evidence ID E7-0230 source. Category override table window. Handover draft observation. Override tables were high-risk vector for class relabeling order link. Item 7 governance review expected consequence. Override permissions become controlled and reviewable. Entry 47 evidence ID E7-0235 source. Escalation suppression config snapshot window. Pre-order capture observation. Suppression settings reduced cumulative anomaly escalation in disputed period order link. Item 7 remediation controls expected consequence. Suppression changes require independent approval and logging. Entry 48 evidence ID E7-0240 source. Dual vault export records window. Day 7 close observation. Litigation and governance vault copies match checksum order link. Full execution resilience expected consequence. Single repository loss cannot erase control memory. Annex B 72-hour controlled operations log summary, pre- and immediate post-order. Log 01 May 6, 2026, 610 request class. Non-routine consultancy result. Halted reason. Missing contract and deliverables trace control node. Legal review gate. Log 02 May 6, 2026, 642 request class. Maintenance emergency result. Rerouted reason. Category clarification required control node. Dual approval queue. Log 03 May 6, 2026, 705 request class. Peril batch result. Approved reason. Continuity carve-out valid control node. Routine channel. Log 04 May 6, 2026, 726 request class. Insurance premium result. Approved reason. Policy due date within window control node. Routine channel. Log 05 May 6, 2026, 744 request class. Tax remittance result. Approved reason. Statutory due date control node. Routine channel. Log 06 May 6, 2026, 803 request class. Consultancy support result. Halted reason. Class template mismatch control node. Classifier gate. Log 07 May 6, 2026, 819 request class. Legal retainer top-up result. Held reason. Missing authorization mapping control node. Legal review gate. Log 08 May 6, 2026, 841 request class. Facility repair result. Queued reason. 2 bids pending control node. Dual approval queue. Log 09 May 6, 2026, 904 request class. Payroll correction result. Approved reason. Employee pay integrity control node. Routine channel. Log 10 May 6, 2026, 926 request class. Strategic consulting result. Halted reason. No allowed template class control node. Retired path check. Log 11 May 6, 2026, 958 request class. Patient transport vendor result. Approved reason. Direct care continuity control node. Routine channel. Log 12 May 6, 2026, 1012 request class. Contractor mobilization result. Held reason. Schedule evidence incomplete control node. Legal review gate. Log 13 May 6, 2026, 1037 request class. Utilities batch result. Approved reason. Ordinary operations control node. Routine channel. Log 14 May 6, 2026, 1102 request class. Consultant invoice result. Halted reason. Policy class exclusion control node. Classifier gate. Log 15 May 6, 2026, 1129 request class. Reimbursement claim result. Queued reason. Receipt chain check control node. Dual approval queue. Log 16 May 6, 2026, 1154 request class. Insurance adjustment result. Approved reason. Continuity and coverage obligation control node. Routine channel. Log 17 May 6, 2026, 1211 request class. Advisory fee result. Halted reason. Legacy alias blocked control node. Retired path check. Log 18 May 6, 2026, 1242 request class. Payroll supplemental result. Approved reason. Labor compliance control node. Routine channel. Log 19 May 6, 2026, 1308 request class. Maintenance emergency result. Approved reason. Safety risk verified control node. Dual approval completed. Log 20 May 6, 2026, 1337 request class. Legal service result. Held reason. Engagement letter pending control node. Legal review gate. Log 21 May 6, 2026, 1405 request class. Consultant onboarding result. Halted reason. Prohibited class route control node. Classifier gate. Log 22 May 6, 2026, 1433 request class. Utilities correction result. Approved reason. Routine settlement control node. Routine channel. Log 23 May 6, 2026, 1502 request class. Transport extension result. Approved reason. Direct care continuity control node. Routine channel. Log 24 May 6, 2026, 1529 request class. Advisory installment result. Halted reason. Attachment lineage missing control node. Legal review gate. Log 25 May 6, 2026, 1557 request class. Payroll result. Approved reason. Scheduled run control node. Routine channel. Log 26 May 6, 2026, 1626 request class. Tax adjustment result. Approved reason. Statutory compliance control node. Routine channel. Log 27 May 6, 2026, 1651 request class. Facility vendor advance result. Held reason. Authorization mismatch control node. Legal review gate. Log 28 May 6, 2026, 1718 request class. Consultancy reserve result. Halted reason. Class disallowed control node. Classifier gate. Log 29 May 6, 2026, 1744 request class. Insurance rider result. approved reason, continuity necessity control node, routine channel. Log 30 May 6, 2026, 1811 request class, payroll correction result, approved reason, employee entitlement control node, routine channel. Log 31 May 6, 2026, 1842 request class, special advisory result, halted reason, retired template invocation control node, retired path check. Log 32 May 6, 2026, 1907 request class, maintenance ticket bundle result, queued reason, invoice packet incomplete control node, dual approval queue. Log 33 May 6, 2026, 1936 request class, utilities sweep result, approved reason, ordinary operations control node, routine channel. Log 34 May 6, 2026, 2003 request class, patient care supplies result, approved reason, direct treatment continuity control node, routine channel. Log 35 May 6, 2026, 2026 request class, consulting fee result, halted reason, no permitted path control node, classifier gate. Log 36 May 6, 2026, 2058 request class, legal hold administration result, held reason, mapping review required control node, legal review gate. Log 37 May 6, 2026, 2122 request class, payroll advance correction result, approved reason, labor compliance control node, routine channel. Log 38 May 6, 2026, 2149 request class, insurance settlement result, approved reason, policy obligation control node, routine channel. Log 39 May 6, 2026, 2214 request class, consultant deposit result, halted reason, prohibited class control node, retired path check. Log 40 May 6, 2026, 2243 request class, utilities result, approved reason, routine batch control node, routine channel. Log 41 May 6, 2026, 2307 request class, facility repair result, approved reason, documented safety necessity control node, dual approval completed. Log 42 May 6, 2026, 2336 request class, advisory reconciliation result, halted reason, unresolved beneficiary linked route risk control node, legal review gate. Log 43 May 7, 2026, 005 request class, payroll result, approved reason, scheduled continuity control node, routine channel. Log 44 May 7, 2026, 028 request class, tax remittance result, approved reason, due date control node, routine channel. Log 45 May 7, 2026, 051 request class, consultant top-up result, halted reason, class policy exclusion control node, classifier gate. Log 46 May 7, 2026, 119 request class, transport vendor result, approved reason, direct care continuity control node, routine channel. Log 47 May 7, 2026, 144 request class, advisory retainer result, halted reason, retired alias call blocked control node, retired path check. Log 48 May 7, 2026, 212 request class, payroll correction result, approved reason, employee entitlement control node, routine channel. Annex C consequence ledger by stakeholder and control layer. Ledger 01 stakeholder, Northline operations team layer, continuity consequence. Routine obligations remain uninterrupted under constrained non-routine governance. Ledger 02 stakeholder, independent manager layer, authority consequence, active control over non-routine disputed lane with auditable accountability. Ledger 03 stakeholder, prior template approvers layer, permissions consequence, direct disputed path initiation and applicability confirmation suspended pending order. Ledger 04 stakeholder, payroll beneficiaries layer, continuity consequence, protected from dispute spillover by explicit carve-out language. Ledger 05 stakeholder, tax and insurer counterparties layer, continuity consequence, compliance obligations unaffected by disputed route controls. Ledger 06 Stakeholder, Escrow Endpoint RC, 7712 Layer, Preservation Consequence, Freeze maintained pending adjudication and secured return implementation. Ledger 07 Stakeholder, Court Supervision Channel Layer, Reporting Consequence, Phased return reports required for non-immediate recoverable amounts. Ledger 08 Stakeholder, External Auditors Layer, Governance Consequence, Quarterly checks mandated for template and conflict controls. Ledger 09 Stakeholder, Counsel Teams Layer, Process Consequence, Formal channel supremacy over informal narrative exchange. Ledger 10 Stakeholder, Hospital Care Operations Layer, Continuity Consequence, Treatment support disbursements protected from rights route disputes. Ledger 11 Stakeholder, Branch Risk Operations Layer, Monitoring Consequence, Path state and alias retirement must remain verifiable in logs. Ledger 12 Stakeholder, Beneficiary Merits Process Layer, Adjudication Consequence, Preserved funds and chain records reduce irreversible pre-merits distortion. Ledger 13 Stakeholder, Family Communications Layer, Conduct Consequence, Lawyer channel default reduces informal pressure on disclosure boundaries. Ledger 14 Stakeholder, Compliance Office Layer, Remediation Consequence, 30-day governance plan delivery becomes enforceable obligation. Ledger 15 Stakeholder, IT Controls Layer, Technical Consequence, Dual verification and legal queue become mandatory for disputed non-routine classes. Ledger 16 Stakeholder, Route Classifier Governance Layer, Policy Consequence, Class note mismatches trigger hold conditions instead of silent progression. Ledger 17 Stakeholder, Attachment Lineage Custodians Layer, Evidence Consequence, Support packet evolution requires traceable version integrity. Ledger 18 Stakeholder, Appeal Process Layer, Litigation Consequence, Narrow challenge likely focuses on proportionality rather than factual denial. Ledger 19 Stakeholder, Workforce Morale Layer, Operations Consequence, Boring continuity alerts replace panic-driven exception management. Ledger 20 Stakeholder, Records Retention Layer, Memory Consequence, Dual Vault Storage lowers single-point loss risk. Ledger 21 Stakeholder, Risk Committee Layer, Oversight Consequence, Suppression settings and alias maps become reportable governance artifacts. Ledger 22 Stakeholder, Routine Vendors Layer, Cash Flow Consequence, Ordinary payments continue while disputed disbursements face controlled scrutiny. Ledger 23 Stakeholder, Legal Review Node Layer, Gatekeeping Consequence, receives structured inflow with defined denial reasons and audit visibility. Ledger 24 Stakeholder, Finance Reconciliation Team Layer, Recovery Consequence, split between immediate return and secure return tracks, standardizes follow-up. Ledger 25 Stakeholder, Care Recipients Layer, Stability Consequence, Direct service continuity insulated from beneficiary route controversy. Ledger 26 Stakeholder, Institutional Trust Posture Layer, Rebuilding Consequence, Confidence tied to controls and cadence, not relationship language. Ledger 27 Stakeholder, Data Forensics Interface Layer, Evidence Quality Consequence, Technical findings preserved for later stage without overclaiming intent. Ledger 28 Stakeholder, Policy Authors Layer, Governance Design Consequence, Threshold logic must include cumulative pattern detection to reduce structuring risk. Ledger 29 Stakeholder, Supervisory Judge Layer, Enforceability Consequence, Narrow, specific order language increases durability under review. Ledger 30 Stakeholder, Future Dispute Handlers Layer, Precedent Consequence, demonstrates continuity and rights protection can coexist via structured controls. Ledger 31 Stakeholder, Account Initiation Actors Layer, Accountability Consequence, system automation does not remove responsibility from accountable accounts. Ledger 32 Stakeholder, Template Maintenance Administrators Layer, Technical Governance Consequence, Legacy Path Retirement includes aliases and derivative labels. Ledger 33 Stakeholder, Cross-Domain Authorization Handling Layer, Legal Process Consequence, Implied Consent Framing weakened where explicit scope channels exist. Ledger 34 Stakeholder, Quality Assurance in Notarization Layer, Process Integrity Consequence, Sequencing corrections become compliance artifacts, not optional corrections. Ledger 35 Stakeholder. Beneficial owner verification layer. Adjudication support consequence. Freeze buys time for field completion without irreversible transfers. Ledger 36 Stakeholder. Family relationship repair layer. Social consequence. Postponed behind rule restoration and monitored implementation. Ledger 37 Stakeholder. Operations leadership layer. Governance consequence. Must report measurable remediation milestones under external visibility. Ledger 38 Stakeholder. Escrow administrators layer. Preservation consequence. Endpoint controls remain active until merit stage instructions supersede. Ledger 39 Stakeholder. Monitoring engineers layer. Vigilance consequence. Nightly anomaly checks stay active despite de-escalated public posture. Ledger 40 Stakeholder. Narrative of this case layer. Meaning consequence. Outcome defined by enforceable controls, not dramatic declarations. At 1327, after writing these annexes, I read the entire file once, without editing. It no longer looked like a dramatic chapter. It looked like an operations manual for surviving a dispute where timing, classification, and route design mattered more than volume. At 1334, I added one final note for myself. If this ever happens again, start with scope maps, not assumptions. If this ever happens again, preserve first, explain later. If this ever happens again, ask for boring orders that move behavior. At 1341, I closed the document. At 1344, I reopened it and added this last sentence because leaving it out would make the story less true. I did not walk out of court feeling triumphant. I walked out feeling responsible for maintenance. That was enough.